I'd like to introduce Greg Epstein from Perry Videx LLC. Our companies had a transaction many years ago, I think 8 years ago now, and we ended up with a bunch of glass-lined reactors. I think they were all stainless steel. Can you educate our collective audience? What is a chemical reactor? What do they do?
It's actually quite simple. If you picture a chemical plant as your kitchen in your house, then the chemical reactors are the pots and pans on the stove, to which you add various ingredients. You heat or cool, depending on the process. You stir, you mix, you can create inside the pot a pressure cooker, and so all of these, all of the attributes that I'm going to describe about a glass line reactor, if in your mind while you're think about a pot on your stovetop, cooking a recipe, that at the end you put in 4 chemicals and you take out 1.
Look at the bolts on top of this. Is like a pressure cooker. These are scary. All those bolts on the top, does that hold it all together so it doesn't like take the whole building out? What's that about?
Well, yes, it is a short answer. Generally, what you'll see them is not bolted like that all the time. Only bolted like that when it's super high pressure, or when you need the ability to take off the lid to clean it.
Right.
Most of the time, you're going to see a reactor like this will be welded on both ends. It'll be welded in a dish shape, which is the physics of how you are able to contain pressure. Every vessel is going to be rated for a certain pressure. In the U.S., rated by PSI, pounds per square inch. If you consider that air is 15 PSI, most of the reactors that have value are rated internally to withstand roughly 90 PSI or 6 atmospheres. In Europe, you would call them 6 bar, which is 15 PSI. And that's in most chemical reactions, not all, but in most chemical reactions. And if you think back to chemistry class in high school, there was pressure, there was temperature, but the pressure is an important element to being able to affect certain chemical reactions. So internal pressure is one of the first things that we look at. If it's rated for 90 PSI or better, that's pretty standard. That's pretty good.
All chemical reactions don't need a reactor, though, to do this. I mean, you can mix them in a simple tank. This is only when there's some kind of a reaction that creates a change in atmosphere or temperature, or you need to control it. If you had to give someone who was buying a reactor, obviously size is a big difference. You got little small ones that you use pilot plants to test things, and then there's huge production size reactors. But notwithstanding the size requirements, what's the most important thing for somebody to understand and to look for when they're buying a used chemical reactor? What's really important?
Number one is the material. It's going to either be built out of stainless steel, which is pretty common. It's going to be built of steel lined with glass, which is, funnily enough, known as a glass-lined reactor. Or it's going to be an exotic metal like Hastelloy or titanium or zirconium. Those are the exceptions. Generally, they're going to be stainless steel or glass lined. The reason you use stainless steel or glass lining is to fight corrosion. So that's the first differentiation you're going to have is what's the material? The reason they line reactors with glass is for applications where the chemicals that are being mixed are particularly corrosive. And so the glass is inert and will withstand any kind of corrosion. So
how long does the glass lining last? I remember you and one of the things we did was we had to spark test these. And can you explain what spark testing is and what does it mean?
Right. So there's uniform, when it comes out of the factory, the glass is lined in a uniform thickness inside it. Imagine the inside of a steel tank that's coated with glass and then literally baked on in a huge furnace. And the technology is such that they're pretty good at keeping uniform thickness, but when you use a reactor, sometimes certain areas of glass wears a little bit thin. So what a spark test does is allows you to determine where the glass is thin and where you want to be careful, or you may want to actually get it repaired prophylactically before it fails.
They can reline those? They could put new glass in?
actually, there is a pretty robust market for reglassed reactors. Actually, we're big participants in that. There's only a few places in the country you can get your reactor glass line. One happens to be in Rochester, not far from you. Wow. The other's down in Corpus Christi, Texas. And so they actually, it's quite a scene to see one of these reactors come out of the furnace glowing red. It's pretty wild as they bake the glass onto the inside.
It's almost like a glazing process then.
It is an internal glazing.
Right.
Okay. All right. So, the other thing the next thing that you're going to want to know, in terms of, as a buyer, what's important to a buyer, which then I guess would be important to a lender that wants to see what the residual value of this is, how is this vessel heated? Generally, there'll be a second wall around the original vessel.
That's called a jacket, right?
It's called a jacket. Yep. Creates an empty space that you can circulate steam, you circulate high temperature hot oil, or if it's a cooling process, you can circulate coolant. And what that does is it heats or cools the vessel through the walls of the reactor. Pretty standard. And then the third component will be the mixer. And the mixer typically will enter from the top on a vertical axis. At the bottom will be a turbine or a propeller or some type of mixing blade, depending on the application, that will keep the product in moving or in suspension that allows the reaction to take place. So you want to know what the material is. You want to know what the heating or cooling situation is, what the jacket is. You want to know what the mixing situation is. And then last, you really want to know what the age of the equipment is. Glass line reactors don't age as well as stainless steel reactors. So, a 30-year-old stainless steel reactor still has some life in it potentially, but a 20-year-old glass line reactor is getting close to the end. So that's, unless you want to get it reglassed. So the age would be the other thing that I would want to know as a lender. But as a lender, the reactors are ubiquitous in the chemical world. Everybody uses them.
So almost like a used car, that depreciation curve is going to be fairly steep at the front end of that if they're financing new equipment, and then will it level out similarly and hold value?
It will.
Until maybe year 20.
I was going to say there's not a lot. The assumption I'm making is proper use and maintenance, but there's not a lot of difference in residual value between a 5-year-old and a 15-year-old in that example. Okay, there's a big drop off from year one from a 1-year-old to a 5 or 6-year-old, but from a 6-year-old to a 15-year-old, the curve flattens. The downward value curve flattens out, so it becomes yes.
Awesome.
That was an inartful way of agreeing with you.
Fantastic. Greg Epstein, CEO, President of PeriVidex. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thanks, Dave. Good to be here.